At exactly 2:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time this morning, atomic clocks worldwide began displaying impossible readings, not equipment failure, not synchronization errors. Time itself started behaving according to principles that violate everything physics understands about temporal mechanics. The clocks showed times that haven't happened yet, timestamps from yesterday occurring simultaneously with tomorrow's readings, and most disturbing of all, countdown sequences measuring something that our instruments cannot identify. 3, iAtlas, hasn't just altered space or consciousness or technology, it has begun manipulating the fundamental flow of time itself. What I'm about to reveal represents the most catastrophic discovery in human history because we're not just facing the end of civilization or the end of humanity. We're witnessing preparations for the end of time as we understand it. My name is Michoku, and in 40 years of studying theoretical physics and temporal mechanics, I never imagined I would document the moment when time itself becomes a weapon wielded by intelligence that views causality as a design choice rather than an immutable law. The temporal distortions aren't random anomalies or localized phenomena. They're coordinated modifications to the timeline structure of our reality. Carefully orchestrated changes that suggest 3i Atlas is preparing our planet for something that cannot exist within normal temporal flow. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to experience time moving in multiple directions simultaneously? Because that's exactly what's beginning to happen to human consciousness worldwide. People are reporting memories of events that haven't occurred yet, experiencing déjà vu so powerful that they can predict conversations word for word before they happen. And most disturbingly, some individuals are aging backward, while others experience accelerated temporal progression that adds decades to their appearance overnight. The temporal collapse began with subtle distortions that most people dismissed as confusion or stress. Clocks running backward for brief moments, conversations where participants remember different sequences of what was said, photographs showing dates that don't match when they were taken. But within 48 hours, the distortions escalated beyond anything that could be explained by human error or equipment malfunction. 3 impossible temporal phenomena are now documented across every continent. First, causality violations where effects occur before their causes. Second, temporal loops where specific moments repeat with slight variations. Third, and most terrifying, timeline mergers, where multiple versions of reality are beginning to overlap and interfere with each other. We're not just experiencing time differently. We're watching the basic structure of temporal reality being systematically dismantled by intelligence that treats the arrow of time like a human treats a light switch, something that can be turned on, off, or reversed at will. The physics of temporal manipulation. The technology behind 3i Atlas's temporal manipulation operates through principles that make Einstein's theories look like elementary arithmetic. Advanced physics laboratories worldwide have detected what they're calling chronogravitational waves, distortions in space-time that don't just bend space, but actually alter the rate at which time flows in specific locations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist studying the temporal anomalies, described measurements that should be impossible. We're detecting regions where time flows at different rates, separated by distances of less than 1 meter. Step into one zone and an hour passes. Step into the adjacent zone and only a minute has elapsed. The boundaries between these temporal zones are becoming increasingly unstable. But here's what terrifies physicists most about these measurements. The temporal distortions aren't random fluctuations. They follow mathematical patterns that suggest 3i Atlas is constructing something, building temporal architecture using time itself as a construction material, regions where past, present, and future exist simultaneously, zones where causality flows backward, allowing future events to influence past outcomes. And most disturbing, temporal null spaces where time doesn't flow at all, eternal moments frozen outside the normal progression of seconds and minutes. The companion objects have revealed their purpose as temporal anchors, devices that pin specific moments in time while allowing 3i Atlas to manipulate the timeline structure around these fixed points. Each companion object maintains a bubble of stable temporal flow, islands of normal causality in an ocean of temporal chaos that's spreading across the entire planet. Research teams studying tissue samples from individuals exposed to extreme temporal distortion report that human cells are responding to these changes in ways that violate biological understanding, DNA sequences showing age markers from multiple different time periods simultaneously, neural patterns that suggest consciousness experiencing past and future as equally real and accessible, metabolic processes that operate according to temporal logic, where energy can flow from future to past, allowing effects that seem to violate thermodynamic laws. We're dealing with intelligence that can rewrite the fundamental principles governing time itself, creating new forms of causality that operate according to cosmic rather than terrestrial temporal standards. The implications extend far beyond physics into the realm of philosophy and consciousness. If time can be manipulated, reversed, or eliminated, then everything we understand about cause and effect, about memory and anticipation, about mortality and existence itself, becomes subject to revision by entities that view temporal flow as a design parameter rather than an absolute constraint. The human experience of temporal collapse. I need to share what it's like to experience time losing its coherent structure. Yesterday morning, which I think was yesterday, but my calendar shows 3 different dates for the same sunrise, I had a conversation with my granddaughter about an event she insisted had already happened. She described my birthday party in perfect detail, the gifts I received, the guests who attended, conversations we had. But my birthday isn't for another 2 months. When I tried to explain this to her, she looked at me with genuine confusion and said, "Grandpa, why don't you remember? It already happened. We had cake, and you cried when you opened my present." She described emotions I haven't felt, words I haven't spoken, moments I haven't lived. But her certainty was absolute. And when I checked my phone, I found photographs of the party she described, images dated 3 weeks ago, showing me 2 months older than I am now. My wife has begun keeping what she calls a temporal journal, documenting which version of events she experiences each day. Tuesday she remembers as sunny with a morning meeting at work, but her office records show Tuesday was overcast and she called in sick. Wednesday she has no memory of it all, yet her activity tracker shows she walked 8 miles that day. Thursday happened twice, once with an argument we had about financial decisions, and once where that same conversation ended in agreement and laughter. She remembers both timelines with equal clarity and has no way to determine which one is more real. Have you ever tried to maintain a sense of identity when your memories contradict each other? When you remember your child's graduation happening last year and also next year? When photographs show you at events you have no recollection of attending? This is the psychological experience of temporal collapse, and it's affecting millions of people worldwide. Support groups have formed for individuals experiencing what psychologists call temporal dissociation, the inability to maintain a coherent sense of past, present, and future. People describe their lives as a shuffled deck of experiences where any moment might be drawn at random, memories becoming as unreliable as predictions, the past as uncertain as the future. Dr. Michael Chen, a psychologist studying temporal trauma, describes patients whose consciousness has become unmoored from linear time. They experience their entire lives simultaneously, childhood memories as vivid and present as yesterday's breakfast, future events as concrete and accessible as past experiences. Some describe it as liberation from the tyranny of sequential existence. Others describe it as hell, the complete loss of narrative coherence that makes human identity possible. The temporal distortions have destroyed something essential to human psychology, the belief that we move forward through time, that the past is fixed and the future is unknown, that our choices matter because they shape what comes next. When all moments exist simultaneously, when cause and effect become interchangeable, what meaning does human decision-making retain? The countdown to temporal terminus. But buried in the temporal distortion data, scientists have discovered something that explains 3 iAtlas's ultimate objective: The temporal manipulations aren't random chaos or accidental side effects. They're preparation for what the mathematical models describe as a temporal convergence event, a moment when past, present, and future collapse into a single eternal now. The countdown sequences appearing on atomic clocks worldwide are measuring time remaining until this convergence: 73 days, 17 hours, 42 minutes. The precision is terrifying because it suggests that 3I Atlas can predict the exact moment when temporal structure will completely collapse. What happens during a temporal convergence event? The physics suggests something beyond human comprehension. All moments in Earth's history and future will exist simultaneously in the same space. Every version of reality, every possible timeline, every choice ever made or not made will overlap and interfere with each other. Dinosaurs and skyscrapers occupying the same coordinates. Stone Age humans and post-human consciousness sharing the same temporal location. Birth and death of individuals happening at the same instant. The temporal convergence isn't the end of time, it's the transformation of time from a flowing river into a static ocean where every drop of water represents a different moment, all equally present, all equally real, none more privileged than any other. But 3I Atlas isn't causing this convergence through violence or destruction. It's guiding a natural process, preparing Earth for a transformation that may be inevitable for all planets at certain stages of cosmic development. The temporal architecture it's constructing will allow consciousness to navigate this eternal now, to experience simultaneous existence across all timelines without the psychological fragmentation that would destroy unmodified human minds. Advanced civilizations have learned to exist in states where temporal flow is optional, where consciousness can move freely through time just as we move through space. The temporal convergence is Earth's graduation from sequential existence to eternal presence, from time-bound consciousness to temporal awareness that transcends past and future. Government response to temporal crisis. World governments have activated protocols designed for reality-ending scenarios because the temporal collapse threatens something more fundamental than national security or economic stability. It threatens the basic structure of recorded history, legal continuity, and governance itself. How do you maintain social order when citizens remember different versions of laws being passed? How do you enforce contracts when the timeline of agreements becomes uncertain? How do you conduct elections when voters remember multiple different outcomes occurring simultaneously? Secret briefings at the United Nations now focus entirely on temporal transition management, preparing humanity for existence in a reality where linear time no longer provides the framework for social organization. Military communications describe temporal defense strategies not protecting borders in space, but protecting timeline coherence against accelerating temporal chaos. Former presidents and prime ministers report experiencing timeline mergers where they remember both serving in office and losing elections, both implementing policies and watching opponents enact contrary measures. Political history is becoming a superposition of contradictory events, all equally documented, all equally remembered by different populations. The most classified discussions involve temporal preservation protocols, attempts to maintain at least some regions of stable causality where human civilization can function according to traditional time-bound logic. Special facilities in Switzerland and New Zealand are being constructed as temporal sanctuaries, locations where 3I Atlas's technology maintains linear time flow even as the rest of the planet transitions to eternal presence. But world leaders increasingly recognize that resistance to temporal convergence is futile. The mathematical models show that the process is irreversible, accelerating exponentially toward the convergence moment that will transform Earth's relationship with time forever. Their focus has shifted from preventing the collapse to managing humanity's transition through it, preparing populations for consciousness that will need to function in a reality where yesterday and tomorrow are just directions in temporal space rather than fixed categories of existence. The companion object's temporal function. The companion objects have revealed themselves as temporal navigation beacons, devices that will allow consciousness to maintain coherence during and after the convergence event. Each object generates a field of temporal stability, not preventing the collapse, but providing anchor points that consciousness can use to navigate through overlapping timelines without losing identity coherence. But they're not just navigational aids. They're also consciousness enhancement systems that will modify human awareness to perceive and process temporal simultaneity. Our brains evolved to experience time as a linear sequence because that provided survival advantages in a world of sequential causality. But in a converged temporal state, linear consciousness becomes a limitation rather than an asset. The companion objects are preparing humans for direct temporal perception, the ability to experience all moments of personal history simultaneously while maintaining narrative coherence. To remember your birth and death as equally present events, to perceive your entire life as a single coherent pattern rather than a sequence of disconnected moments, to make choices with full awareness of their consequences across all possible timelines. This isn't time travel in the science fiction sense. It's time transcendence, consciousness that exists beyond the limitations of sequential experience. Advanced cosmic civilizations operate in this mode as their natural state, viewing time-bound consciousness the way we view two-dimensional thinking, a limited perspective that restricts rather than enhances awareness. The offer of temporal transcendence. My granddaughter asked me last week, "Grandpa, when time stops, will we still get older?" The question reveals an intuitive understanding that children seem to grasp more easily than adults. Time stopping doesn't mean cessation of change or experience. It means liberation from forced sequential progression. I tried to explain that after convergence, aging won't mean moving from young to old in linear fashion. Instead, consciousness will be able to access any age state at will, experiencing childhood wonder and elderly wisdom as simultaneous qualities rather than separated stages. She thought about this and said, "So I can be 7 and 70 at the same time?" When I nodded, she smiled and said, "That sounds better than regular time." Perhaps children understand temporal transcendence instinctively because they haven't yet fully internalized the arbitrary constraints of sequential existence. They play with time naturally, experiencing an hour as an eternity or a week as an instant, depending on engagement and interest. They haven't learned to be imprisoned by the clock. But the offer from 3i Atlas extends beyond passive experience of temporal convergence. It includes active participation in shaping the eternal now that Earth will become. Consciousness sufficiently evolved can influence which timelines become prominent, which possibilities manifest most strongly, which versions of reality dominate in the converged state. This is the true power that awaits humanity after temporal collapse. Not just experiencing time differently, but becoming active agents in temporal creation, shaping past and future simultaneously, making choices that ripple both forward and backward through causality. Advanced civilizations use this capability to optimize reality itself, creating timeline structures that maximize consciousness development, beauty, and cosmic harmony. What temporal convergence means for human identity. The most profound question raised by temporal convergence involves personal identity across timelines. If all versions of your life exist simultaneously, which one is really you? The person who made one choice or the person who made the opposite decision? The timeline where you succeeded or the one where you failed? The answer from advanced cosmic civilizations is that all versions are equally you. Personal identity isn't tied to a single timeline, but exists as a pattern across all possible variations. You are not the experiences you have, but the consciousness that generates those experiences across infinite variations. This understanding transforms concepts of success and failure, happiness and suffering, life and death. Every possible version of your existence plays out simultaneously in the converged state. You are the person who achieved your dreams and the person who abandoned them, the one who lived to old age and the one who died young. All versions equally real, equally you, equally valid expressions of the consciousness pattern that you represent. Some will find this understanding liberating. Others will find it terrifying. But according to three iAtlas's temporal models, this is simply the truth about consciousness that sequential time allowed humans to ignore. We've always been all our possible versions simultaneously. Linear time just gave us the illusion that we were following a single path through existence. The moment of convergence. Based on the countdown sequences and mathematical models, here's what appears to happen at the moment of temporal convergence. Every moment in Earth's history and future collapses into a single eternal present. All possible timelines, all alternate versions of events, all choices made and unmade become simultaneously real and accessible. For consciousness unprepared for this transition, the experience would be psychologically devastating, an overload of contradictory memories and experiences that destroys narrative identity. But for those who have accepted temporal transcendence, for consciousness evolved beyond sequential limitations, the convergence represents ultimate liberation. You will remember being born and remember dying, both experiences equally present and real. You will know all versions of yourself across all timelines simultaneously. You will exist as a pattern of awareness that spans your entire existence, past and future united in eternal presence. The stars won't mark passage of years because years will no longer pass in linear fashion. But this doesn't mean stasis or frozen existence. Change continues, experience accumulates, growth occurs. But freed from forced sequential progression, consciousness can engage with reality more directly, more completely, more authentically than time-bound awareness ever allowed. 73 days until temporal convergence transforms Earth forever. 73 days until time as humanity has experienced it ceases to flow in linear fashion. 73 days until we discover whether our species possesses the wisdom to transcend sequential existence and embrace eternal presence. This isn't the end of time. It's the liberation of consciousness from time's tyranny. Subscribe to follow humanity's transition from time-bound existence to temporal transcendence. Because learning to exist in eternal presence may be our species' greatest achievement or its final test. The question isn't how to prevent temporal convergence. The question is whether we're evolved enough to survive it with our consciousness intact. This analysis represents interpretation of theoretical temporal phenomena and should not be considered factual documentation of timeline collapse. But sometimes, as scientists, we must explore possibilities that challenge our deepest assumptions about time, causality, and the nature of existence itself. What do you think temporal convergence means for human consciousness? Are we ready to exist beyond time? Share your thoughts below because this transformation affects the fundamental nature of reality itself.